Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Ms. Coakley, could you call the roll for us?
Mrs. Heinz?
Here.
Mr. Green? Here. My mic does not work. Mr. Derman?
Here.
Mr. Luke?
Here.
Mr. Harrell?
Here.
Mr. Nation?
Here.
Mrs. Richardson?
Here.
Mr. Winkler?
Here.
Mrs. Drucker?
Here.
Mr. Bittencourt?
Here.
Mrs. Lamy?
Here.
Mr. Hersey?
Here.
Mr. Bro?
Here.
Mr. Kuzan?
Here.
Mrs. Page?
Thank you very much. Would everyone please rise? The invocation will be led and pledge will be led by Mrs. Page.
Lord, I pray you be with us this evening. I pray you guide and direct us with all the decisions that we have to make. I pray that you give us strength and wisdom. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to welcome everyone to our meeting tonight. We appreciate everyone gathering here in Slidell for our regular board meeting. I understand we have a lot of students from Southeastern who are studying to become teachers and educators. And at this time, I'd like to ask those students if they would stand for us so we could recognize them. It's great to have all of you with us. Board members, is there anyone who would like to recognize someone in the audience? All right, if not, we'll move on to our first item, which is public comment, 5 minutes. Our first speaker is Mr. Reed Falconer, candidate for State Senate.
Ready? Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I represent the citizens of St. Tammany Parish in the House of Representatives in our state government. As a member of the House, I sit on the Appropriations and Education Committees, where I see firsthand how the MFP is presented by Bessie and how it and the retirement system are funded by the state. At the conclusion of the process this year, I was pleased to add my vote in both committees to the pay raise for teachers and support personnel. I'm also happy to let you know that while serving in Baton Rouge, I've always been offered and maintained an almost instant line of communication with members of your administration, which has helped me in my representation of the people in my district. Interesting topics this year included funding for early childhood education, suicide prevention in schools, virtual school attendance, financing of school facilities, and the use of video cameras in the classroom. I would not have been able to make the decisions that I made in the Education Committee without the input from the staff here at the school system in St. Tammany Parish. As you probably know, I'm offering my candidacy for the District 11 Senate seat in the election this Saturday. I commit to you that if elected, my heart and my vote will always be solidly behind our teachers and administrators, and you as school board members, helping to ensure a quality education for our children and grandchildren. Thank you again for providing me this opportunity to address you tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reed. We appreciate the work you've done in the House of Representatives, and best of luck to you in your seeking of the Senate seat. Thank you. Our second speaker tonight is Mike Cooper, candidate for Parish President.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mike Cooper. I am a candidate for Parish President for St. Tammany Parish, which election is this Saturday. I have a lifelong commitment to St. Tammany Parish. As I look around this room and those out in the audience, I know many of you here, and it's an honor to be here. I attended public and private schools in Covington and graduated from St. Paul's School. And from there, attended USL and earned a BA degree with a major in city and regional planning, working my way through college. Skipping ahead many years, in 2011, I was elected mayor of Covington, and for the past 8 years have served as mayor of my hometown. And it had been an honor to serve the citizens, providing services that they expect and deserve with the budget that and the resources that we have each and every year. It will be an honor to serve as parish president for St. Tammany Parish and to work with other elected officials, particularly the school board, in providing the cooperation and coordination to assure safe transportation, safe traffic, safe movement of vehicles and school traffic through our communities, and to provide any other services on a parish-wide basis. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you, should I have the honor of serving as your parish president. Thanks again for this opportunity, and have a great meeting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate your working relationship as mayor of Covington, and best of luck to you in the election. Our next person who signed up is Juanita Zarang, but she's ill this evening, so we'll move on to the next one, which is Sheree Coulter.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you all, and you all know who I am and what I do. I had the pleasure of touring some schools yesterday, and it was very exciting to see the schools from a different perspective. And it was nice to be kind of catered to by the schools. So thank y'all for that opportunity. We definitely appreciate it. It did open my eyes to some things that may be needed, and I would like to offer my assistance to anything that I could do to better improve those schools that I did tour. So I will email you all and let you know what that was. More importantly, I come here to talk about bullying. We have a great parish here. We have a great school system, but we have a problem. There is an issue with bullying, and bullying impacts children for the rest of their lives. So we have an opportunity to have a positive impact and change the way things flow for children from starting at a very young age into college. Statistics show that this will follow them all the way into adulthood. We have a couple of schools. I'm not going to name them. I know the rules. However, there are some children who have been brutally bullied in the school system. There was a pre-kindergartner at a school here in Slidell, and this child was kicked in the head. The incident happened, when I say incident, multiple incidents, 5 times. And the parent addressed all 5 of these incidences, and it was never appropriately addressed. So finally, a resolution to the child being moved to another school, which the parent is very grateful for that opportunity. However, it did not solve the problem. It did not address it. It was not properly documented. And I would like to see that change moving forward. We need proper documentation. If we document it properly and address it properly, then we can stop it. But until we acknowledge it and address it, we're never going to stop that culture. We have too good of a school system to let things like this go on. And we have so many children that are under your charge. It is your responsibility to make sure that these things are addressed appropriately. I would love to say that moving forward, these things have been addressed. There was another child at a school in Slidell, and this child was threatened by an employee of the school system. It was something that happened over several days. When we went to the school to address it. At first, it was denied. Then it was finally admitted. This child had to move schools as well. So it kind of seems to be a trend that we're moving the victims of bullying instead of moving the people who are bullying. And that's how it's supposed to go per St. Tammany policy. So I would love to see these things addressed appropriately and given proper attention so that we don't have to uproot these children out of the schools that they're in and have their entire lives change. And usually it's out of district, and the parent's life is impacted by these changes as well. As you all probably know, an out of district assignment requires the parent get up and bring their child to school. That's not how it's supposed to be. The child didn't do anything wrong, yet their life is totally uprooted. And the child I was talking about with the employee from St. Tammany Parish, this child has since dropped out of public school completely because of her experience and how traumatic it was to her personally. Could this have been avoided? Possibly. But could it have been addressed properly and maybe change the course of this child's life? Absolutely, without a doubt. So I hope that you all consider these things when you're passing policies that go into our handbooks that the parish adopts moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Coulter. Our next speaker is Kathleen Canino. Ms. Canino.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Canino. I'm from Covington, and excuse me, I've lost my voice. But I just wanted to talk to y'all about some of the people are having a little bit of trouble still with the ABA getting in with that process, and I'm not sure if it's the parents don't quite understand what to do or where it's getting a little delayed, but there is one part of it where, so for the BCBAs, they don't hire a line tech, and that's who comes in and works with the child until they know how many hours they can come in and how many hours the school will approve is being determined afterwards. So there's a little disconnect there because the BCBAs can't hire anyone until they know how many hours the school will allow them to come in, and then so there's that barricade. So they would need to know maybe the MOU meeting first before background checks to see how many hours y'all would allow or the school will allow or is appropriate, and then do the background checks after before they come in the school still. That way they can have everything done, but they also know how many hours they will be hiring a line tech for. And so that's all. I just wanted to bring that up. So thank y'all for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Canino. Lee Barrios.
Lee Barrios, retired teacher. The second biggest issue that I hear from teachers, and I hear from teachers every other day, I get a message from a different teacher, and they're not always from St. Tammany. Sometimes they're from different parishes in the state. But the second biggest issue I hear now is the discipline issue. Our handbook, student handbook, has a lot to say about discipline, but one of the things it says that's important is that discipline is for the purpose of promoting an effective learning environment. Improving student conduct means higher student achievement, higher performance scores, and I was sorry to actually see that printed because that shouldn't even be an issue when it comes to children and their discipline, and overall the greater success of the students in St. Tammany Parish. When I was trying to decide which of those issues I was going to address or how to speak about it, I pulled up a blog that was written by Mike Deschatels. You probably all know Mike, you respect him. This was a piece he wrote a couple of years ago about discipline. And he actually reads from a story that was written by a teacher in Lafayette Parish that was published nationwide. So I'm going to read a little bit of that because the same thing applies. Last week, Lafayette Parish teacher Abby Bro went before her school board and read a letter describing the conditions in many of our schools that are driving good teachers out of the profession. That letter was printed in the Washington Post and got rave reviews from teachers all over the country who were confronted each day by the same demoralizing conditions. Bro's letter focused on two major issues. One was the disrespect of the teaching profession by our public officials when they make sweeping changes to public ed without so much as consulting the experts in the classrooms. That concern was echoed all over the state in forums hosted recently, this was a couple of years ago, by LAE to hear teacher concerns about what we call gender reforms. The other big issue raised by Abby's letter was the concern by teachers about a growing breakdown in basic classroom discipline and the perception by teachers that our policymakers are changing school practices and policies to make student discipline worse than better. Teachers feel that when you add this deterioration of classroom discipline to the huge burden of paperwork and red tape heaped on today's teachers, for some teachers it becomes sheer torture to stay in the classroom. What Abby said was, enough is enough. That brings me to section LRS 17416 of Louisiana Education Law. And the law has a lot to say. All of these front and back pages printed are about school discipline that have been codified. If you read the Teacher Bill of Rights and section 416, it should be crystal clear that all Louisiana teachers are supposed to have the right to run their classrooms without worrying about disruption or disrespect from students, parents, or administrators. Sadly, this is not the case in some schools and in some school systems, and unfortunately, in some of ours. Some school systems and some schools are not enforcing section 416. I'm hearing from teachers and from what I've learned and discussed with some of you all about mandates from the state. Our school performance scores are in a couple of ways affected by discipline reports. And I'm afraid that teachers are being told, not all, it's never all, it depends on the school, depends on the teachers, it depends if they're in the subgroup, if they have a problem, if they're in intervention with their subgroup for behaviors, they're told not to write up students because those reports go to the state. Teachers could put their reports directly into the computer. Some principals are saying, do not do it, send it to me, or some are even saying, do not write these students up. I got a call from a teacher about a week ago, and I believe she said it was a first grader, a kindergarten first grader, had punched a teacher in the face. They did what's now called, this is amazing to me, a room clear. Have any of you all heard of that? What they do is instead of removing the student, they remove the entire class until the student calms down. Some intelligent psychiatrist, I guess, told them that it's better for that student who's acting up not to be traumatized by being taken out of the classroom. This has got to stop in our schools. Teachers are seriously quitting. They're being told if they can't, it's bad for students who need to be disciplined. Parents are not understanding, and we're getting parents that no longer respect the system either because their students, their children and other people's children are not being disciplined. I don't think that was 5 minutes, but I'll go with it. And even though it seems like last time I was here, Beth, you owed me like 20 minutes because you let somebody else speak.
Not 20 minutes, but
I'll let it go.
thank you, Ms. Barrios. All right, we did not have anyone sign up for 3 minutes, so we'll move on to the agenda item to approve the minutes from the regular meeting held on October 10th, 2019. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes? I have a motion by Mr. Kuzan, a second by Ms. Drucker to accept those minutes. Do we have any questions from board members on those minutes? Any comments from the public? If not, would everyone please vote on the minutes? We have 13 yeas, 2 abstentions. The motion carries. Our next item is appropriate retirement resolutions for the following certificated personnel subsequent to October 10th, 2019. Mr. Jabbia.
Thank you, Ms. Heinz. Board members, the names are Sharon L. Posey, Fountainblue Junior High, 17.81 years, 13.31 years in St. Tammany Parish. Carol E. Ullman, Lakeshore High, 23.26 years, 20.76 years in St. Tammany Parish.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to accept that? Motion by Mr. Derman, and second by Mr. Loop. Any questions from board members? Any comments from the public? If not, would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas. Congratulations on your retirement, ladies. Our next item is an appropriate retirement resolution for the following non-certificated personnel subsequent to October 10th, 2019. Mr. Javier.
Thank you, Ms. Heinz. Frank M. Winston, Mandeville Middle, 24.13 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. Gail W. Marshall, Pearl River High, 16.41 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. Sandra S. Guillory, Pitcher Junior High, 15.71 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. Johnny L. Stevens, Transportation Center, 28.46 years, all in St. Tammany Parish. George F. Sill, Transportation Center, 20.05 years, all in St. Tammany Parish.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to accept the non-certificated personnel? Ms. Lamy made that motion and Mr. Betancourt seconded. Do we have any questions from board members? Any comments from the public? Not, would everyone please vote? Fifteen yeas, the motion carries, and I'd like to congratulate those non-certificated personnel on their retirement. Our next item is to consider and take action with respect to adopting a resolution approving the unified guidelines for the industrial tax exemption program for St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana. And I'm going to call on Ms. Prevost to explain what this is before I read that resolution.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Hines. The St. Tammany Corporation, they're the lead local economic development organization for the parish, has been coordinating the development of a standardized process and set of guidelines for the industrial tax exemption projects, also known as ITEP, in this parish. They developed a working group which was comprised of representatives from the parish, the school board, the sheriff, and the municipalities that make up St. Tammany's various taxing authorities. The goal was to create a commonly agreed upon set of guidelines that represent the best interests of the parish, while also being reasonable and consistent to incoming and existing businesses. The St. Tammany Corp will formally take the administrative and vetting responsibilities associated with the local ITEPs, working with the work group, while still allowing the taxing bodies, once that is complete, to make the decision to vote yes or no without any recommendation from that group. But you will just be presented with information. Everyone, all the different governments will receive the same information, a packet of information. The St. Tammany Corp, with the assistance of the Parish Working Group, has drafted a resolution to adopt common parish-wide guidelines for all ITEP projects. You have been provided with the draft resolution, the parish ITEP application, and the parish ITEP guidelines, plus a process flow chart that shows how the process will work. The St. Tammany Parish government, sheriff, and city of Covington have already approved this resolution, with the city of Slidell pending approval in the next few weeks. The guidelines and the application and other documents developed by the work group were based on the school board's application and guidelines that I developed last fall. I serve in that work group and will continue to serve in that work group, and I had detailed input into this process. So these resolutions are basically the same as what we already have. It will just be, they'll take the lead, the businesses will come here and they will vet them. We will meet as a group, work group, and then we'll present you with a packet of information, and it will be up to you to vote yes or no. Any questions?
Well, I'm going to read the resolution. All right. The resolution is, whereas pursuant to the current industrial tax exemption program rules, the St. Tammany Parish School Board, along with St. Tammany Parish, the Sheriff's Office, and when appropriate, the local municipalities are given a 30 to 60-day window to approve or disapprove industrial tax exemption requests for projects within St. Tammany Parish. And whereas St. Tammany Corporation, the St. Tammany Parish Development District, working with the St. Tammany Parish School Board, the St. Tammany Parish Council, the Parish President's Office, the Sheriff's Office, and cities within St. Tammany Parish, has created unified guidelines, processes, and metrics for the review and evaluation of industrial tax exemption requests. And whereas the purpose of creating unified guidelines, processes, and metrics is to provide understanding and clarity to the taxing authorities making the local endorsement decisions, as well as the businesses who utilize this important historic economic development resource. Now therefore be it resolved that the St. Tammany Parish School Board hereby adopts as the school board's application and evaluation process for industrial tax exemption request within the St. Tammany Parish those set forth in the Industrial Tax Exemption Program, Unified Guidelines for St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana. And so I'm looking for a motion to accept the resolution and to accept these guidelines. All right, I have a motion by Mr. Nation. Do I have a second on that motion? Second? All right, I have a second by Ms. Drucker. Now, are there any questions on the resolution that we're passing this evening? Mr. Nation?
Thank you, Mrs. Hines. No questions. Just want to commend Ms. Prevost and, of course, Mr. Foltz and all of his staff because, once again, this school board is leading the way in many things, but even here in this ITEP resolution. As I've said many times when we've passed these in the past, I cannot say any more than I've already said in terms of how important it is for us to support our local businesses as they support us and create jobs in this community. I know in the past members of the public have mentioned Trinity Shipyard, as well. What about Trinity? Well, let me tell you something. Trinity Shipyard is blowing and going. I know that because the company I help manage and operate is taking barges out of there. Took some barges out of there the other day. So that shipyard is blowing and going, and may not be so if it had not had in the past received this industrial tax exemption. Of course, at that point, we were not involved. So, and I'm certainly glad that we are involved, and all the local taxing agencies are involved in those things that affect us. So I wholeheartedly give my support to this and hope the rest of the board concurs. Thank you.
I'd like to make it perfectly clear that by accepting this resolution and with these guidelines, that does not mean that we accept every ITEP application that comes before us. We still will come together as a body and vote on that. So I would like to make that perfectly clear. All right, any other comments from board members? Mr. Brough.
Yes, I'd also like to add that there is no guarantee that we would have to accept the recommendations. It's just, it makes more sense that somebody outside, rather than, put the burden on you, to have somebody with experience from the outside that can do all this and, and basically evaluate it probably from a better perspective and maybe get better answers from the person who's applying, more timely answers. Than everybody having to try to dig in and say how much sales tax do you expect and how much does this. So I support this motion. St. Tammany Parish is not known as a great industrial base for production. So there's not a lot of industry here, and we have to do everything we can to attract that industry. So I support ITEP, but as long as it's done rightly and the return on investment includes the amount that we would be losing in tax base as an investment. As long as it's done properly, I completely support this resolution.
Ms. Prevost, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd also like to make it perfectly clear that by adopting these unified guidelines, each of the agencies will have the same information, and as in a hard copy, so to speak, and everyone will be able to evaluate that information. And then, of course, we'll still be able to question that particular group that's applying for the exemption. So, all right, any other comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Please come forward.
Lee Barrios. So you all know from past discussions that I am against the school system giving up school taxes as ITEPs. That being said, because to me, the school board is not in the business of economic development, like, say, the parish would be more interested in that. As a matter of fact, our public schools are here to develop the leading factor in the success of businesses when they come to our parish, and that is an educated workforce. But when I got this, my first reaction, I'll admit, was, oh, this is not going to be good, before I read it. And I read it, and I couldn't see anything that I thought was a problem. I thought it was actually pretty good, but what do I know? So I gave I can never get his name right, Broderick Baggert of Together Louisiana, who actually did a lot of research, an organization did a lot of research on ITEPs, and were instrumental in getting the governor, I believe, to get the ITEP process changed. So I sent it to him and said, if you have time to look at this in the next 30 minutes, could you tell me if there's something I'm missing? I just, I'm wary of this. And so he did, and he called me, and he said he was amazed that to him, it was a very good policy. And he even cited one part in it, and he said, if I were you, I wouldn't tell them which part it is, because they might decide to change it. That was exceptionally good, because it cleared up one of the big loopholes that exists in some of the ITEP process. You answered a question I was going to ask, because it's not specifically written in here, to point out that each of the entities does have the ability to make their own decision on this, because I know that was in question when you had previous discussions. And I believe that's it, but I just wanted to tell you that you've been vetted by an organization that actually brought this whole thing to fruition, and I think it's a good thing. But however, I will object to every single ITEP that comes before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrios. Any other questions? Mr. Doan?
Thank you. I just think it's very important for everybody to understand that when they're talking about how the ITEP got shifted from the state reviewing these, and then they came back to the parish, and last year was our first round of them, and this is our second. But I think it's very important that, even though I tend to disagree with some of Ms. Barrios' comments about the taxing benefits or not, it's at least up to us as a body that sits here in St. Tammany that is our money that we're either accepting or denying the exemption, as opposed to somebody in Baton Rouge that has no knowledge or impact of that funds. So I think it's important that our constituents know that if we do a good job, then we get re-elected. If we don't do a good job, they cannot re-elect us. So I think, but it's their public local input that is represented by us, as opposed to some board in Baton Rouge that's appointed, and we have no control over it. So I think by us doing this in a unified way and having a unified application with an outside source and giving us the information benefits everyone involved. So I fully support this measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Darman. Any other comments? Would everyone please vote on the motion to accept the unified guidelines for industrial tax exemption program in St. Tammany Parish? We have 15 yeas. The motion passes. Our next item is certification of board members. Elizabeth B. Heinz, Matthew E. Green, Michael J. Derman, Stephen J. Loop, Brandon Harrell, Shelton J. Richardson, Michael E. Winkler, Sharon L. Drucker, Ronald Betancourt, Tammy Lamy, James Bro, and Dennis S. Kuzan in completion of 1 hour of training for 2019 presented on November 7, 2019, as mandated by Louisiana Revised Statute 17:53. Mr. Foles.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Board members do indeed certify that the board members mentioned and completed their training on November 7th.
Thank you very much. Our next item is approval of the recommendations from the committee as a whole meeting for Human Resources and Education held on November 7th, 2019. Mr. Kuzan.
Thank you, Madam President. The committee as a whole meeting held on November 7th, 2019 recommends the approval of the Veterans Resolution, and I so move. I'd like a unanimous second, please.
All right, we have a motion to accept the Veterans Resolution, and we have a unanimous second on that. And we're proud to say that we have our veteran, Mr. Ronald Betancourt, on our board with us. Do I have any comments? Mr. Betancourt.
Thank you. Regarding the resolution that was read last week, I want to commend Mr. Derman for doing such a great job. And also, if you ever get to talking to him about his dad's exploits in World War II, it's truly a story. And I was just really proud for Mike to, be willing to read that resolution last week. So thank you, Mike.
Mr. Betancourt, thank you very much. And yes, my father was a POW for 27 months during World War II, and it's with great honor I got to present the resolution at the Veterans Day ceremony last week. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Betancourt. Thank you, Mr. Derman. Any other comments from board members? Any comments from the public? If not, would everyone please vote to accept the Veterans Resolution? We have 15 yeas. Mr. Kuzan, does that complete your report?
Madam President, that completes our report.
Thank you very much. Our next item is approval of the recommendations from the committee as a whole meeting for Business Affairs and Administrative held on November 7th, 2019, and I'll call on Mr. Derman for that report.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. As you mentioned, we met on November 7th, 2019, and we had the following recommendations. A, recommends the acceptance of the revision to School Board Policy, Section E. And I so move.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Derman to accept that and a second by Mr. Loop. Do we have any comments from board members on School Board Policy Section E? Any comments from the public? If not, would everyone please vote on Section E? We have 15 yeas. Mr. Derman?
Thank you. Item B recommends the acceptance of the revisions to School Board Policy Section I.
Do I have a motion for that? A motion from Mr. Betancourt, a second from Ms. Richardson. All right. Do we have any questions from school board members? Mr. Betancourt?
Yes, if Mr. Jabia would agree, you might, just for the public can hear this, the ones sitting at home watching with their popcorn, just a brief explanation of like which each section, like one of them pertains to dogs and one of them pertains to this or that, rather than just a letter, E, I, J. I think it would be helpful and appropriate.
Mr. Jabia, would you like to explain?
Sure. Section I contains two policies, one on service animals and the other one on Special Education Advisory Council. The service animals is an old policy, but because of the codification and the Advisory Council policy needed to come first, then the Advisory Council was codified to IDDFA, and we had to move the service animals to IDDFB. That was only changed for that. And the other one was a new policy that has to be in effect come January 1, and that's the Special Education Advisory Council, where the legislature said that we had to have a certain number of parents, a certain number of professionals, a certain number of other group to make up this committee, and the superintendent would be in charge of appointing those to that committee. That's what this policy entails. It's advisory committee. It's not binding, but it's a committee that was set up by the legislators. And that has been, those positions have been advertised and posted on our website. The deadline is over, and we will be in that process and working with the superintendent to get those ready to go for January 1.
Thank you, Mr. Javier. Mr. Brody, you have a question?
Yes, I'm wondering if there's been a determination on how many members will be selected for that?
Yes, sir, 8.
8?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I think we had close to 70 applicants. Yes, very good, very, very encouraging.
Any other questions? Do we have any questions from the public on School Board Policy Section I? If not, would everyone please vote? We have 15 yeas. That motion passes. Mr. Derman?
Thank you, Ms. Heinz. We're going to move to section item C, which recommends acceptance of the revision of School Board Policy Section J. Mr. Javier, you want to explain that one?
Yes, sir. I'll do my best. Section JGCB is immunizations. We had an immunization policy, but the legislature put some new laws into effect about certain things dealing with immunization, so everything was changed in here to reflect those laws. The next one was on the behavior health services. We do have a policy on that, but again, the legislature added some definitions for some different types of individuals that can serve in these capacities, and again, by law, we added those. And then the last one is student fees, fines and charges. Every school system had to come up or have to come up with a policy by December 1 with what is our policy on student fees, and also an appendix that shows what those schedule of fees are. Ms. Heinz, with your permission, I would like to tell you what transpired this past week after the board voted to accept ours, because we were all excited and ready to go. And ironically, I got a call from Danny Garrett, who's attorney for the Louisiana School Board Association, on Friday, just reminding me, hey, y'all need to get that policy done. Remember, it's got to be posted on the web by December 1, and you know, it's got to have your schedule of fees. And I says, Danny, man, we're rocking and rolling. I said, we've done it. He said, can you send it to me? Because I'd like to look at it and see and offer any suggestions, if any. Well, he looked at the policy, and the policy was great. The schedule of fees, he felt like would not fly. He had a meeting with Department of Ed officials. They are going to actually, December 2nd, go to every website of every public school system and supposedly charter schools to check to see if it's out there and to make sure that that schedule is correct or is in line with the law. And he felt that by us having a blanket fee, kind of a generic fee that said, if you remember, $10 for elementary, $12 for junior high, and $20 for high school was not going to fly. And he sent me an example of one from another parish, and they actually had every item almost, or every course, and what those fees were going to be for. So we started, and also I talked to him about the school supplies, and he said, no, school supplies is in the law, but in the schedule of fees, it does not go there. These are schedule of fees that are supposed to be for what I would call elective classes. Core classes, we cannot charge anything. So we started doing some research and looking at what our schools were doing. Amy and her staff, I met with her and her staff, Mr. Foles. We found that the fees being charged were for a number of different things. And we also found that it was not, the participation was not 100%. And probably it's 50% or less that the parents were paying the fees for other students. So what we would like to do tonight is to change the schedule of fees to reflect that there will be no fees. And that we would look, if you recall, I'll just back up a little bit, in this policy, the policy says that we must review this annually, and then any changes we need to make, of course, would come to you for approval. We would like to go and during the budget process that begins in the spring, start looking to see if we can put this in our budget where we don't have to worry about fees for students and who pays and who doesn't pay and what they're used for, and that the schools would not be losing any money, that they would still get their full fee based on what we thought. So high schools would look at the number of students and give them $20 for every student, $12 for junior high, $10 for elementary. And that way there would be no having to worry about, did you collect it for the right thing? Did everybody pay for it? So that's what we'd like to propose tonight. So I'm asking to change the policy that was given to you last Thursday night, only changing the schedule of fees to eliminate what we had and to insert no fees in that schedule of fees.
So what, Mr. Drummond, what we're looking for out of the committee is acceptance of policy J with approval with changes to student fees schedule.
I so move. I think that's the appropriate and easiest way to resolve this until we can get some more clarification and then revisit it next year.
All right, so I'll have a motion from Mr. Darwin. Can I have a second, and then we'll have discussion? I'll have a second from Mr. Hersey. Now, board members, do you have comments or questions? I need a show of hands. Oh, we do have queue up. I'm sorry. Mr. Green?
Thank you, Madam President. Did I get that correct, that the school supplies line would be eliminated too and be captured within the policy?
School supplies, we don't collect fees, and so the schedule of fees is why it doesn't belong here, but it's in the policy. And again, as we reported last Thursday night, we're certainly going to evaluate that of what we're doing this year and to come back with you with the recommendation, because you do have to approve that also.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is that currently, as the policy states that we were going to approve, it says that it would be requested by classroom teachers and of a student's parent or legal shall not exceed a published amount per student per school year as determined by each school principal shall approve all school supplies requested. So that drives that down to an individual school's decision-making authority over what may be appropriate for that school. But obviously, we don't want that amount to exceed a certain level and get out of control. But if it's eliminated and we can come back and discuss that, then...
And I think what we learned from Danny is the school supply list does not have to be included in this law with the December 1st deadline.
In the schedule of fees.
In the schedule of fees. Does not
it's in the policy.
It's in the policy, but does not have to be included in the schedule of fees. We had talked about last week, looking at our wish list versus what's required and letting principals have input on that. So we have some more time on that to change that and work through that with lessons learned from this past year.
So just a point of clarity, we're deleting all 4 rows of the schedule of fees in this Appendix A tonight, and that's what we're approving.
Yes, sir. What we adopted, or what you approved last week, was those 4 lines. Those are gone.
Okay.
And we're going to insert no fees to show that our school system is not going to be collecting any fees.
With the idea that during the budget process, we would look if the school system could pay these fees, and we would look separately at the supply list and make sure that could work better than it did this past year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Ms. Lamey?
Okay, I'm very excited about that. The thought of not charging fees is exciting, but only if we really can cover them. And I know we're going to have to wait and look at that.
Right.
But isn't this policy supposed to say what we have in place currently? The December one was it supposed to be for this year previously or the upcoming year?
No, this is the new policy, and what we did originally was what we did currently.
so it's okay.
But it's okay for us to go ahead and
Okay,
change
you know, I
that.
went to that law seminar, so
I know.
I'm just replaying that lecture, making sure we're on track
know,
here.
I know.
But I just didn't want a parent to look at it and say, no fees, I paid for this and this and this and this, so that's why I was just
This is
clarifying.
moving forward.
Okay, got
That's
it.
what we look for, yes.
Got it.
Thank you, Ms. Slammy. Mr. Winkler?
Yeah, I think this is a win for the students and the schools if we can put this money in there, because there's a low percentage that we get to collect, and it's work on the teachers and on the administration at the schools to collect it. And if they're getting 100% from us, that would be great. So,
Correct. That's what we're going to attempt to do.
what we shoot
Yes,
for.
sir.
This sounds like a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler.
Our thoughts exactly.
Mr. Kuzan?
This is complete, this is gonna be an annual thing coming out of the budget, right? So it would satisfy the concerns that I had at our meeting that we had last week.
Yes, sir.
I would certainly satisfy my concerns.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Mr. Bro?
Yeah, I want to concur that I had several concerns with the way it was presented at the last meeting. There were all these exemptions, a whole list of exemptions, and my concern are the people who didn't even need exemptions and still didn't pay. This eliminates that problem. If we can afford it, and I'm fairly certain we can, we're talking about $400,000 roughly or less.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
So I completely support this.
Great, thank you.
Just a point of clarity, though. Are we going to vote on all three?
Yes.
Yes.
Then I'd like to also express my concern about the immunization one. I pointed it out at the last meeting that the exception is wide enough to drive a 18-wheeler truck through. Basically, I think it's putting our student body at risk. If an epidemic occurred, obviously you would send people home who didn't have the immunization, but how many people you might lose before that happens. So I'm concerned about that. I realize that the we're using the wording from the legislation, but it just doesn't make sense to me to have a policy that's so wide open and meaningless.
Yeah, it's just law. It's law. And we did look it up for you to let you know that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bro, for reiterating your point. Any comments from anyone in the public?
Right.
Had a couple of concerns. One of them was under the damage to textbooks and instructional materials, the paragraph where you said, in lieu of monetary payments, both school systems and parents may elect to have students perform school community service activities, which I think is a very bad idea. I don't know if you're going to address that tonight or not. And also under your economic hardship waivers, I noted when I was going through the student handbook on the discipline thing, on page 7, it says, unless voluntarily disclosed by a student's parents, no employee of the school system shall require disclosure, and it had a list of things. H was family income, there goes your waiver, and J was social security numbers, which the parish continues to require social security numbers for, I guess, new registrants for school. So I don't know if you want to change the handbook or if that is derived from some statute or not. But it does say that nobody can ask for proof of family income. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? If not, would everyone vote to accept the revisions to School Board Policy Section J with approval with changes to the student fee schedule? We have 14 yeas, 1 nay. That motion carries. All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is, I'm sorry, Mr. Dermot, that's your line.
Thank you, Ms. Heinz. I'm so excited to be here, too. Item D, recommends acceptance of the changes to school board policy file BCBI, school board meetings.
And that's public participation in school board meetings. Do I have a motion to accept those recommendations? I have a motion from Ms. Richardson, a second from Ms. Page. Do we have any questions from school board members on this policy? Do we have any comments from the public? If not, would everyone please vote on school board file BCBI? We have 15 yeas. Mr. Dermott.
Thank you, Ms. Heinz. Item E recommends acceptance of referring school board policy file BEA, school board member conduct back to the policy review work group committee. So move.
We have a motion to send policy BEA back to committee for further work. I have a motion by Mr. Dermott and a second by Mr. Betancourt. Do we have any comments from school board members? Ms. Lamy?
I just want to thank the committee again because I know you put a lot of time and effort, extra meetings into this, and honestly, I'm disappointed that we have to send them all back because I feel like they worked so hard, and I feel like it should have been resolved there, and anyway, it is what it is, but thank you so much for your effort, that's all, your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lamy. Hopefully, it won't be a long meeting next time. All right, do we have any comments from the public? If not, would everyone please vote on sending policy BEA back to the work group? We have 13 yeas, 1 nay, and 1 abstention.
Okay, Ms. Heinz. Item F recommends acceptance of the internal auditor job description. I so move.
I have a motion to accept the internal auditor job description and a second from, I've heard numerous, I'll have Mr. Nation on that one. Do we have any comments from board members? Ms. Richardson? All right, we'll queue up then. Ms. Richardson, would you begin, please?
I promise this board I only have one comment to make tonight. I need to put on public record how strongly I am against this job description. We joked about changing the title from internal auditor to something else because we're not even willing in this job description to follow the regulations that communicate the highest standards of ethics in the land, and that's the international internal auditor regulations. I struggle with this. We claim to lead the way, but when you compromise on regulations such as this, we are not leading the way. Number two, I wanted a simple, objective opinion from the AG. You shot down the resolution for that. Again, I respect your decision. However, it's really important we understand who this person reports to. The third, there's no report line to this board. We have this loose statement that makes no sense to me. It really doesn't protect the internal auditor should there be a fallacy. So again, when you look at the standards, we don't even come close to them. We had to pull that out, actually, of the job description, which is embarrassing to me. And then we claim that no other district has an internal auditor that reports to the board. And again, time and time again, 3 of them in our state, and these are large districts. They have IAs that report directly to the board. And let me remind you, it's Calcasieu, East Baton Rouge, and Caddo. So I am strongly opposed to this. I realize I'm outnumbered, but I want the public to hear my comments loud and clear.
Ms. Lamy?
I have 2 points to make. One was the same one I made last week, so I want to say that again. My issue is the reporting to mechanism. And Mr. Jabby, I know you pointed out about would we want to supervise them, and I kept saying absolutely not. But to me, supervision and reporting to are 2 separate things. I just feel that if there were an issue at one of my schools and I would want the auditor to be able to talk to me, or want to be able to ask them questions, not just receive a report. Although the report monthly is really all I need, but should the need arise, I should be able to speak to them about my schools, and they should be able to come to me. When I asked about it last week, we were explained that they do say reported to the superintendent and school board, but it's a dotted line, and all it meant was that they receive a report. I feel like if that's the case and we're doing the same thing anyway, then why would we refuse to put the same thing they have, reports to the superintendent and school board? So I really, really strongly feel that we should consider that as a report to, not because somebody's not trusted, just for transparency and just to keep everybody accountable and to allow us to be able to speak to the auditor should the need arise, since they're going to be working at our schools that we represent. It's not about central office, it's about our schools. And then the second thing, I was just going to make a comment about the request for the opinion. I personally don't need an opinion, but the fact that someone on our board strongly feels that way and we're saying, sorry, we're not going to let you do it, is crazy to me. We just said that the state is making us have a special education advisory committee that we're taking applications for. And we reiterated that there's nothing binding by this committee. We're simply getting their what? Opinion. We're getting their opinion. Whether we do anything with it or not, we're getting their opinion. So if an elected official who is elected by her constituents feels extremely strong that she wants an opinion from the AG, let her get it.
Ms. Lamy, you're not speaking to the motion.
Okay.
It's to accept the job description.
Okay, all right, well then, when is a good time to say that what I just now said?
Pardon me?
When would be the appropriate time, because I'm still learning, for me to speak on that issue?
Well,
I would have to ask for it to be back on the agenda again? Is that how it goes?
The request for the opinion failed.
Right, so if I wanted to speak my mind now about something that, because we just spoke about a school board committee, and that's what just like made this light go off because he said it's not binding, it's just an opinion, it made it trigger, but now I can't speak of it. So should I request by you to put it on the agenda for next time? Is that how what would be the way to do that appropriately?
May I answer or try to answer?
Please.
I think the appropriate time was at the committee as a whole meeting Thursday night.
Right, but when you said something just now that made me think of it.
But that doesn't make any difference. That item has been addressed.
Your time came and left?
The only way you can address it again if it becomes an agenda item.
So you request it be on the agenda. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Right, Mr. Nation.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I, again, as I was not here last week, unfortunately, due to work concerns, but as I've said previously, and again, I repeat myself, I take the completely opposite position from Mrs. Richardson. I completely support this internal auditor job description. I mean, any of us in business know that you have to answer to the chief executive, and clearly in Act 1 by the state of Louisiana, it is plain reading of the law that the chief executive of this school system is the superintendent. This board has no business supervising or according to, nor should we, because it becomes a political process, because we are public officials and it becomes politicized. We hire and fire one person that is the superintendent of the school system, and he chooses his staff. The internal auditor is functionally independent as this, because this internal auditor will answer to the superintendent, and as I've said previously, this person has immediate access to the superintendent, just like his immediate assistant superintendents. So that's a pretty high level, and it serves as a good check and balance on it is a position to allow the superintendent to make sure that his staff is doing the things that this board and he expects, or she in the future expects, to happen. To suggest otherwise is ludicrous on the face of it. So I hope this board will accept the internal auditor position, and let's move forward and put this past us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nation. Mr. Betancourt.
Thank you, Madam President. The internal auditor, they reworked the job description. I would have liked to, there's so many people seem to be upset about this internal auditor and how they do it in Sweden or China or Nebraska or whatever. It seems to me it would behoove us to change the title. I don't know if that needs a special amended motion or whatever, but I would call it special auditor or special needs or school needs auditor or something, so that we don't have all of this fallout about what an internal auditor does and the association that dictates what they do. And that's my thoughts on it. The other thing, there was a job description in the physical duties or something like that. And I had gotten an email from someone that stays involved in our school system and stuff, that it was, I forget the word, what you call it when you, discriminatory, that's it. I couldn't think of that. But I read over it, I don't see where it doesn't say, a lady has to pick up as much as a boy or anything like that. I didn't see anything that was discriminatory in the job description. It had some physical things in there that may or may not be required, but that's all. That's my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Mr. Bro.
Thank you. As I said last week, this is a position that we really need and not filled for 2 years. I was under the understanding that we were doing it in the same way as the other 3 school districts in the state who had an internal auditor. I was surprised that it was a lack of a word "and" in there. But we need this position. I'm going to vote for this position, but I'm not happy about the level of independence that is given to this auditor. I don't know if we ever review job descriptions, but I would like to propose a compromise that we put this on the agenda to review this particular job description in the next 6 months. That's okay. But as of now, I completely agree that we need to have this position in place, and I'm going to vote for it.
Ms. Drucker. Thank you, Mr. Bro.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to ask if I could invite Mr. Jabbia to explain the information that we received on the AG in regards to why we decided not to.
Ms. Drucker, there again, that's not to the motion. The motion is acceptance of the internal auditor job description.
Okay, I apologize on that. In regards to the job description, I agree with actually Mr. Bro, but actually any of these job descriptions, they're fluid. I mean, we can revisit these at any time to make the changes as long as it's a job, it is a board vote. Am I correct on that?
Mr. Jabbia?
The job descriptions.
Job descriptions are fluid. You adopt these job descriptions. Anytime you want to bring up a job description for review, that's certainly your prerogative.
So once we hire the person for the internal auditor, if we say where the reporting, because according to what we are approving tonight, the internal auditor will be reporting to the board as well as.
No, reporting to the superintendent.
Reporting to the superintendent, however, supplying reports to the board.
Correct.
Which means that it would be transparent, that we will know all the information that is given to the superintendent as well. So if we have any questions, we can ask the internal auditor. And if in fact that we believe the way how this job description is written, that we would want to make changes in the future, we have the ability to do that as a board. And I just want to make sure that it's clear that we do have that ability to do so.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Kuzan?
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to call for the question.
All right.
May I make a,
Mr.
just for
Javier.
discussion, for just some comments? You know, as Ms. Richardson said, she wanted the record to reflect. I'd like the record to reflect, and Ms. Prevost, you tell me if I am incorrect or not, but we did check on all three of those school systems that Ms. Richardson referred to. In fact, Ms. Prevost spoke to all three of those school systems, and none of them have the internal auditor reporting to the board. There's one, I think it's Caddo Parish, that has a dotted line, and we asked them what that meant, and I think it's a notation on the organizational chart. It means furnishing reports to the board. So we did check on those. Okay? So for the three school systems to say that they have the internal auditor reporting to the superintendent by the information that we got, that's not accurate.
I also read online, went online and did some research with that myself in those specific parishes, and they had guidelines for different things. I found it ambiguous. In one place they said one thing, in one place they said another.
Right. Thank you.
Do we have any comments from the public? Ms. Barrios?
Lee Barrios. So since Mr. Betancourt brought it up, that was me that emailed, I don't know if I emailed everybody on the board or just some of you on the board, because I was contacted by several people who noticed, I hadn't noticed it, the physical demands section at the bottom. And so I looked up the ADA rules, that's the American with Disabilities Act, on writing job descriptions. And it pointed out some things that, to me, I think you should look into it and see if this isn't discriminatory toward people who, even if they don't have disabilities, why do you need an internal auditor that must be able to lift equipment, forms, and boxes? I mean, how heavy? And if you read the ADA, it's fairly easy to read the ADA requirements or suggestions for job descriptions. I think you'll see that it's kind of unnecessary, but it tends to leave the impression, especially people who are sensitive because they have disabilities, that this is some sort of a restriction to prevent from getting someone with a disability from even applying. So that's why I just sent you that material. A number of years ago, I think it was about 5 years ago, when Dr. Beebe was on Bessie, and she was giving them hell, the only one on Bessie that was doing that. And Bessie was obviously not following APA procedure, which is very important. That's the processes you do to make rules. They weren't following it. So she asked the Attorney General herself for an opinion on some specific actions that they took. And he told her, I can't do that on behalf of one person. The entire board has to have a resolution. Well, of course, Bessie did not approve as a whole to ask for the AG opinion. And it was obvious to everybody who knew what was going on that that was questionable. To me, for you all not to simply approve getting an AG opinion for this,
again,
and that does address the agenda item, and Ms.
No, not the
Richardson
job
brought it
description.
up. To me, it's wrong for you all and questionable, a red flag for you not to simply make a resolution to ask the AG for an opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Javier, would you address
We're in line with the ADA. We definitely can set those. When we interview people, we never say, can you do this or can you not do this? We simply give them the job description for them to review, and we said, is there anything that would prevent you from performing the duties in this job description? So we never question their disability or anything else.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Ms. Canino, did you want to make a comment?
Kathleen Canino in Covington. I'm not sure why the Title I is such a big issue, because Ms. Richardson is clearly asking for the report line to be so that there's transparency for the internal auditor, and suggesting calling it special needs is offensive, one. Two, what's the problem if there's nothing to hide? Those who hide, Why not let the report line be to the board so all of y'all are made aware, and y'all can ask questions, y'all can interact, y'all can do your jobs. I don't see what the problem is with that, because she's not asking y'all to say what the job is. She's just asking y'all to listen and allow that internal auditor the independence to do the job appropriately, which the taxpayers are, paying the bills for, and we want the transparency. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
That's what the job description does.
Any other comments? All right. All right, we have, the question has been called. And, I'd like to just comment that we have discussed this at length for this year, for, as I say, many, many times. And I believe the board is ready to take action tonight. And I would hope that the board would support the action that is taken. So we have a motion by Mr. Derman and a second by Mr. Nation. And we don't have to vote on that. No, all right.
All
right. Then the motion would be to, all right, wait a minute. I need a clear answer here. Do we have to vote on, all right, we have to vote for the call for the question. And that motion was made by Mr. Kuzan with a second by Mr. Hersey. All right, is there any comments from the public on that? Would everyone please vote on the motion to call for the question? That we will not have any more discussion and we'll take a vote. I'm a little unsure about this, but we'll take our attorney's opinion on that.
Waiting on Ms. Drucker and Mr. Harrell.
Ms. Drucker, did you vote? And Mr. Harrell, did you vote?
We did. It went.
All right.
13 yeas, 1 nay, 1 abstention.
13 yeas, 1 nay, 1 abstention. So we will now move on to the vote to accept the job description for the internal auditor. Let's see, there we go.
13 yeas, 2 nays.
We have 13 yeas, 2 nays. The motion carries. Mr. Derman?
Ms. Hines, that concludes our report.
Thank you very much. All right, our next item is announcements, and there will be a special board meeting on Tuesday, November 19th, and Thursday, November 21st, beginning at 5 p.m., board members, for expulsion appeal hearings. Many of you have RSVP'd to that meeting, and if you haven't, I would appreciate you responding whether you'll be able to attend or not. The second announcement is the schools will be closed on November 25th to 29th, 2019 for the Thanksgiving holidays. The offices will be closed one half day on Wednesday, November 27th through the 29th, and I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. And our next announcement is the next committee as a whole meeting will be held on Thursday, December 5th, 2019 at 6 p.m.
Ms. Hines, if I could, I think everyone, it's always special as a former teacher when you see one of your former students succeeding so well in his job and in his community. And tonight is special for me to have Daniel Susano here, who's a former student of mine representing Slidell Police. He was our class president at Slidell High when I worked there. So I've seen him grow in his leadership role, and I'm proud of him. Just wanted to say that to you here tonight. Thanks.
Yes, I did. Thank you for being here this evening. Our meeting is now adjourned.